I think everyone is here. It's my pleasure to introduce both my student and TA this semester, Caleb Shays, and I shared a little bit of his work with Colin, who's also on this panel with the onions that you guys were working on. And it is going to be a fantastic opportunity to see the student perspective on environmental justice. Caleb.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Carmona. All right, so greetings. I would like to thank you all for joining this conversation. I have assembled here a panel of students spanning multiple levels of our academic careers, and we have all participated in research, either individually or through our various institutions. So this panel is designed to provide a platform for students to share their thoughts and observations as the up-and-coming generation of community leaders and pioneers. So tackling issues like climate change, sustainability, and academic community engagement is not going to be a monodisciplinary, we're not going to find solutions monodisciplinarily. It will require us to come together and discuss our perspective on these important issues. So this panel is going to be split into 3 parts, and I'm going to be keeping an eye on the chat in case anybody has any questions for either an individual panelist or the whole panel, and I'll be trying to address them at the end of each segment. So with that out of the way, my name is Caleb Skice, and I am an undergraduate student here at the University of Detroit Mercy, and I'm in the biology department. My current interest and research is looking at the changes in cellular morphology in onions when introduced to perfluorinated compounds. So I'm looking at how the shape of those cells changes when it's introduced to compounds like PFAS and PFOS. So I first developed my interest in research after discovering its great potential to interact and help the local community when taking a pilot research-based program with Dr. Carmona. So now I would like to invite the remaining panelists to introduce themselves in kind. Can maybe start with the high schoolers and move up.
Hello, my name is Yahir Hernandez, and I am a senior at Detroit Cristo Rey High School. And the research project that I did over the summer, I did alongside 2 other students, and our topic was around the air quality in Southwest Detroit. And we chose this topic because, we realized that, it's a familiar topic. A lot of people know a lot about pollution, but we also kind of realized that this familiarity was also kind of a problem because it was almost like as if we were normalizing the idea of pollution in our areas. So we wanted to almost revive those concerns, and so more action is taken.
Hello, my name is Dalia Carmona. I am a junior at International Academy East High School. My current research is on the detection of microplastics in aquatic environments using digital image analysis. I worked with my father, Dr. Carmona, on this project. Our objective was to explore technological applications to detect and monitor microplastic pollution in aquatic systems. I developed my interest in research when I published what was once a science fair project with Dr. Carmona as well.
Hello, my name is Colin Goodman. I'm an undergraduate student at Eastern Michigan University. I am in both the physics and the mathematics department. My current research is actually with Caleb, helping to form mathematical models to kind of describe how the perfluorinated compounds affect the cells. And I got involved in research because for most of my life, I've been pretty interested in physics and mathematics. So when opportunities started presenting themselves for me to perhaps even contribute back to those fields, I was very ecstatic to take those opportunities.
Hi everyone, my name is Joyce. I am currently a graduate student at U of M School for Environment and Sustainability, studying ecosystem science and management. I'm currently researching for a master's project on human-leopard conflict and coexistence in northern Kenya. but previously I was working with Dr. Carmona on our research project on Chagas disease and land cover and poverty connections. And I got involved in research after my sophomore year at UD Mercy when I decided I didn't want to be a dentist anymore. And I just walked into the office and said, you know, I need to do some research, preferably with the environment. And Dr. Carmona had just gotten hired. So yeah, it was all history from there.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dolores Perales. I'm currently a dual degree student at the University of Michigan in the School for Environment and Sustainability, as well as the Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning, getting my MS and MMIP. My prior research through U of M was actually about how Latinx communities and their allies face air pollution in Southwest Detroit and Southwest Los Angeles. So it was a case study more so for focusing on the air quality issue between both cities and how they're very similar in regards to the air pollution and the individuals that live there, but how they are actually very different from one another as well due to the geographic location of, you know, Southwest Detroit and Southwest Los Angeles. So it was a really interesting case to go over with myself, as well as my two other teammates who worked on the case. I first got involved with research was actually my sophomore year of college, where I was working with a professor that originally taught intro to sustainability, which was really fun. And I worked on for a few months on a project about sustainability and what sustainability meant in regards to other disciplines outside the environmental field. So it was a really fun project to work on, and it made me realize how interested I was in environmental sustainability, community sustainability, and the effects of what community sustainability means on various individuals and their respective communities.
Perfect. All right, so one of the first questions that we wanted to tackle was relating to community service. So I apologize to my panelists, as I'm going to tweak it a little bit. So we had discussed that community service is often, what community service is ultimately work and activities provided for the benefit of the community. And usually how that's carried out in when like a company might go on a retreat, or institution like a university or high school will go and take students out to participate in a project like this, is they relegate it entirely to very physical service. And we had discussed that community service doesn't have to be relegated to that position, because work like that is phenomenal when you are developing the ideas behind like why you should care about this community, and how one should care for and care about the well-being of the community that you're a part of. But as you gain in worldly knowledge and experience, you develop a lot of expertise and skill sets that can also be used for the benefit of the community. And so what I mean by that is, like, if you have a STEM degree or going into a STEM field, like most of us are, then you should be able to use that STEM degree for the benefit of the community, because you're applying who you are and your expertise and your interests back onto the community that helped bring you where you are today. So what I kind of wanted to do for as our first discussion question would be, like, how would each of our panelists here, how would you apply your discipline, your current education level? How would you interact with community service? What would that service look like in your discipline?
Well, I was talking to Caleb about this last night, and from my standpoint, I think a large part of what I can contribute is like mathematical modeling. So whether it's helping biologists like Caleb better interpret data that they've gotten so they can reach better conclusions, or maybe it's something ecological. Or another example that came to mind was actually locally studying pollution and trying to statistically model, how could we for example, like vehicles, right? How could we make sure that the roads are a lot less backed up and able to flow more quickly as to minimize pollution in local areas. And these are, active problems that could be solved mathematically. So that's, I feel like, something mathematics could do.
Perfect. So I guess I would provide an example from myself, and that was that I was kind of first introduced to this concept when I participated in that research-based biology class, and we partnered with Dolores to work in an urban garden in Detroit. And I think that especially undergraduate biology can play a role in going out into these communities and trying to offer expertise on solving these very local issues. So when we were looking at water stress in an urban garden, which can have implications on the urban garden's productivity, which if an urban garden can be more productive, then all the better because it's directly serving the community. But we can also look at things like trying to go and look at road salts, which I know is another project, and how they impact the flora and fauna around the area where they're dropped. And these kinds of questions are directly impact how the community is interacting with itself, but academia can provide a basis to operate off of. And so I think that biology can have a role in looking at these kinds of impacts on the ecological environment, even in an undergraduate level. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, I can go. So for me, my background in undergrad was in environment and sustainability sciences, as well as epidemiology. So for me, when I look at how to bring, I guess, community service into, an environmental perspective, I see massive opportunity where, at least in Southwest Detroit, we have various chronic diseases that impact residents here. Now, as a graduate student, learning about environmental justice through environment sustainability, as well as going into urban planning, I see how built environments directly impact public health, and then how, in turn, those specific influences lead to various chronic ailments and diseases, such as asthma, cardiovascular disease, cancer, etc., due to the built environment that we live in. So for me, I see that by involving community sustainability within various projects that within residential neighborhoods like Southwest Detroit, we could definitely integrate green space in neighborhoods to mitigate potential exposures to these various environmental hazards, which most likely, as you hear kind of touched on, is air pollution that we suffer from within the neighborhoods, as well as incompatible land use. So for me, I see what I can do is, because I have that background in epidemiology as well as environmental sciences, mashing those into one to kind of create a space, a green space for residents not only to have access to and be in, which allows people to be outside, play, and be more active, which reduces other chronic health issues, but in turn that mitigates the current stresses that residents are facing, which is air quality and air pollution within the neighborhood. Because they're in green spaces, they're breathing in cleaner air, and these plants also are taking in different pollutants that in turn mitigate those asthma triggers. You can tell my focus was heavily on asthma and within that sphere, so more so chronic health issues in regards to the upper respiratory system. So that's where I kind of see where I can create impact.
Yeah, so Dolores and I are actually in the same graduate program. It's just that she's doing her dual degree. And the master's project that I'm currently working on is studying conflict locations between humans and leopards in northern Kenya. And basically, in just kind of a nutshell, leopards have been killing or attacking livestock, and caring for livestock is one of the largest sources of income in these communities, and the majority of these communities are the indigenous peoples of this area. So in return, they are retaliating by poisoning the leopards or killing the leopards, and so there's this big conflict there that goes for both sides. And for me, pursuing my PhD and integrating the idea that politics and economics and all of these social and what people have considered in the past non-scientific factors are really important drivers in these environmental conflicts, because what you see as conflict is not purely environmental or ecological. There's so many other factors that are involved within it. So through my current research, and then hopefully through my future research, I want to really like consistently integrate those ideas into each other in a way that will benefit communities with that research. Yeah.
So in my past research with Dr. Ramona, we studied the role of mollies in the biocontrol of mosquitoes in the recovery of ecosystems in urban rivers in El Salvador. And I feel that I want to continue using research as a way to solve problems or find a solution that the community has in El Salvador. El Salvador is one of the many countries that has a large population of mosquitoes, and these mosquitoes carry diseases like the Zika virus, the West Nile virus, dengue, malaria. And what we found was that we evaluated the impact that this fish called chimbolo over there, what is now here called mollies, which is a native and a common species there in El Salvador, on the populations that it had on, the impact it had on the populations of mosquito larvae. So we used, so we found how it impacted as a biocontrol in mitigating human diseases, as the ones I've mentioned before, Zika virus, West Nile virus, in the transmission that these viruses are, the way that these viruses are transmitted by mosquitoes, and recovering these urban rivers in El Salvador as an important tool to sustain ecosystem services. So I plan to continue doing that through research and involving the community and seeing what problems the community has, and using research to solve those problems and find solutions.
Perfect. Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
That's fine. With my research, we definitely included like different ways that the community can get involved. Like they could definitely, like for example, they could incorporate more green space around their neighborhoods, or even just by getting the word out on that specific research project that we made. And I feel like that itself could be community service, because like, you know, I personally believe like community service doesn't have to be anything too major. Like your actions doesn't have to be too major to be a part of community service, because like, you know, as long as you're doing something that could help the community in any way, like spreading the word and help, like encouraging others to like, you know, have the idea of sustainability within their neighborhood or in the community, like that itself could be service. So that's what I think.
Yeah, that's great. So I would personally, I would love to dive into this more, but we have 3 sections and only 20 minutes for each. But I did notice a question that popped up, and that was, I believe, kind of addressed to all of us. And that is, can you share your suggestions on how to get started on a research project once the topic or question is chosen?
I can go ahead and just say a quick word. I think we have like at least for our panelists today, we've had like shared experiences where we've felt kind of intimidated by joining research. And it can be like scary at first to put yourself out there and try to look for all of the resources. Be difficult, and sometimes it's hard to find the right resources. But I think that, at least for me, the most important thing was just kind of like getting over that idea that like I might not be good enough to do research, or maybe my research or topic isn't important enough, and just like really trying to find the right resources within your area. And if you don't, I think there's so many good online initiatives that are trying to helping each other within our, especially for young people in science, helping each other find good resources to develop your research ideas and your projects. So I think the main thing is like not letting intimidation get in your way. That was a big thing for me.
Perfect. I would also kind of add on is that I think research seems really big, like that's a monumental kind of task. And I would say like one of our first research projects in Dr. Carmona's class was looking at stomatal densities and morphologies, and we used nail polish and packing tape. So you don't have to, especially when you're trying to find kind of like good resources for this. Sometimes it's not too complicated to try and do something like this. I think a lot of what we did could be done fairly easily, almost at home. So I think that trying to find either other published resources on it, and that might involve like maybe trying to go online and find so maybe somebody has done something similar before. But I think oftentimes, unless your question is absolutely massive or requires a ton of really expensive equipment, it can be a lot less complicated than it might seem. All right. I also see another question is there a template that you recommend as an outline for a project? I'm gonna try and get my camera unfrozen. So can somebody take that over real quick? I don't know if I have one right off the top of my head, but.
For me, I think that it depends on what type of research you want to do. But for me personally, I recommend the Gala platform through U of M. It's fairly easy to navigate and use, and it's free open access to anybody as well. So whatever research you end up doing will be published via the Gala website for anybody to have access to, which is a really great thing. So I highly recommend Gala. It's very user friendly. It's almost as if you're making something up. Yes, I can spell. It's like Gala, like a Gala apple. But I can definitely drop the link to that website in the chat. But it's very user friendly. It is almost like you're writing a blog post or a Facebook post by the way it's formatted. And the way that you format it also allows you to drop in links for various sources. So you can touch on a variety of different topics. And then also you can highlight a word. And then by clicking on that word, it takes you to that source. So you can see potentially where that, other than the resource page or the reference page that you include, you're able to see, oh, this is the direct topic that's related to whatever this person is speaking about, which is really awesome. So I really like Gala. It's really easy to use, and there's such a wide variety of topics that you can talk about in regard to environment and sustainability. Yeah, I recommend the platform.
Perfect. I think I don't see any more immediate questions, so I'm going to jump to the second section here, and that is, are there any gaps that you see related to your discipline? This could be is there something that you're frustrated with at your level in education, or is there something that you wish worked differently in your department? What could be improved on? So that is the scope of the question that I'm thinking of. I almost think that, especially with this one, I kind of want to go from high schoolers up to watch that change progress. So.
Okay, so personally, like mine is like, you know, first of all, it's like, having trustworthy, like having people trust you and your abilities. Since I'm a high schooler, like I definitely like am just like tipping my toe in the water. Like I haven't been fully submerged into this like research like field. Like I just like so far I've only done one major one. So and I guess that's where people like kind of stem their like stereotype that like we don't have that much experience, but we do have potential. So we do know a lot of things, from school, and like it's not like we've done research specifically, but we do have like how you say, um, like those abilities to do them. Like, and I know people that like for my specifically my research project, luckily they weren't like they were, they definitely were open to my ideas. So I definitely didn't have those types of problems. But I do have a lot of friends who like they work at GM for my school, and part of the GM is like you work with adults. And I know that they don't have necessarily tough projects because those tough projects are for those adults, and they get like the little easy like putting files in bins types of tasks because those adults don't trust them with like something very tough, or like they don't think they have that much experience to do so. So that is what my problem in my field is.
Perfect, thank you.
Something that frustrates me at my school is that I wish the focus was more towards way that we can improve the environment, and because I know that the school is focusing on renovating itself, but I think it needs to focus less on redesigning. One of the projects that's going on right now is the school is renovating the common room of sorts, and they're getting new furniture, and they're spending a very good amount of money on this project. And I wish that these funds can be used for something else, such as something that I brought up to the principal was having a research center outside of the school. That way students could be conducting labs outside, and even the ones where we use materials from the pond that we share with the neighboring school. Students can go collect those materials themselves, and they can experience what it's like to do a lab in the field. And I think that this is going to make more students more aware that science isn't about being inside of a lab. Science is more than that. I think more people are going to be more sparked by their interest is going to be sparked by science if they're actively studying and actively collecting those samples, and then not just putting a slide in the microscope and then drawing what the picture is and saying, oh, this is what part of the cell is this is the cell wall, etc. I think it's going to be having that sort of experience is very valuable, and I wish that it was something that was more easily accessible to a school that does have access to those funds. And instead of using it on something as getting new furniture, that they use it on something that could have an impact, not only on our school, but this future generation, getting more people interested in STEM, because science is something so important, especially right now. And I think that it's something very impactful, and doing something as easily as transferring those funds from getting new furniture, new desks, things like that, which isn't as important as to shaping young minds, future generations. So that's something that personally frustrates me a lot.
Definitely, perfect. Colin, you can lead us.
Yeah, so yeah, my idea of where this is really applicable to me in physics, but I feel like this is pretty applicable to STEM as a whole, and it kind of is similar to what Dahlia was saying, is that the way we go about teaching science, I don't feel like accurately represents what scientists do and what research is for, because a lot of times, especially in physics and math, it's very prevalent. It's like, okay, here's the equation, here are the numbers, get an answer, it has to be right or you're wrong. But I feel like in science, what we're actually trying to do is solve problems. We need to apply critical thought. So instead of, teaching people like, okay, this is it, this is how you do it, there's one right answer, we should really be teaching them from the ground up and trying to say, okay, this is true. And then ask them questions. What do you think will happen if we do this? What will happen if you do that? I want to make them think about it critically so that they can try to figure out for themselves why this is happening, why this isn't happening. And this way they'll be much more educated and much more nuanced than they ever could be. And even if they're wrong, right, they'll have to face why they were wrong and actually go back and like kind of correct their own thoughts. So I feel like this would be a much better way of teaching people that would keep people interested, right? Because it's not just regurgitating answers, it's finding answers. And I think overall that would just provide people a better understanding of science and its importance, and perhaps turn less people away from studying science.
That was great. And I think we're going to bounce off of each other quite a bit, because I will say I noticed something incredibly similar in my own department, and that is that especially as a freshman coming into a university, getting involved in it, like actually getting involved in the science, is really difficult because the class is, I think lab classes end up being taught like a lecture instead of as a lab to interact with and apply your critical thinking skills to. And so I think, I believe the accepted term is a cookbook lab, and that is where you're essentially just following a recipe until you get to the end, and that is kind of relegated to the lower classmen. And I see that as a huge issue in this department, because instead of allowing students to engage with the material and actually think through it for themselves, which I think ultimately leads to a greater understanding in the long run, you end up kind of pushing science into a very into a pure dichotomy of right and wrong, which science very rarely is. There's a lot of exploration and development in science, and it very rarely is ever like purely black and white like that. And I think that is a massive problem that I would like to see change.
I can go next. I think Joyce and I are probably going to bounce off each other as well with this one. But from my experience, and I know when Joyce and I were talking when we met before all together, I think the biggest problem that we see is the accessibility to research documents. As graduate students, we have essentially the world at our fingertips. We have a vast amount of research available to us, especially being at the University of Michigan, which is a highly ranked research institution. Because of that, we have open access to a variety of different news sources, journals, articles, you name it. We most likely will have some form of access to it. However, even us as graduate students, and even us having access to a variety of different places to find research, we still have these roadblocks of not being able to have open access to certain journals and publications, where a lot of times there's a cost associated with it, and it comes down to where it's like, where this article may have answered the questions that I'm looking for, but I'm going to have to click away because I don't have the ability as a student to purchase a $200, $100, even a $50 article, which is really unfortunate. So because of that, we oftentimes turn away from certain publications and revert back to other ones because of that barrier to access. And as graduate students, if we can't access that type of material, it comes down to the question, especially working with residents and the community for myself, how are they supposed to access this type of material? And even the things I do have access to, they don't have access to. So it becomes really frustrating to see like this constant pattern within academia of open access resources, and what does it mean to be open access, and why isn't more articles published via open access. And I know I had a professor who was publishing articles, and he had mentioned in conversation during one of his lectures is he likes to publish open access articles, but then realizes he has to continue to publish other articles on various journals and platforms that do have a cost associated with it, because if he doesn't continue to put articles on these types of journals, it can bring his credibility down for some reason, which is really interesting. And it's not a perspective that as a student I thought of, but it's really unfortunate within the world of academia that professors may want to provide open access information to individuals and then feel like they can't because they don't want their credibility as a researcher, professor, whatever, to go down because they're publishing on open access as opposed to very costly elitist journals, which is really frustrating to me as a student who's really interested in not only academia, but bringing academia back into the community and have them having open access to these resources. So I think that's my main, I guess, beef within academia is the lack of open access to not only us, but then to residents, where how are they supposed to have any type of availability to get the same I guess, research that we are, same articles as we are, and then in turn have to turn away to even to more news sources or other articles that may not be as, like, I guess, accurate or may not be fact checked also. So it's just, I think it's really frustrating from my perspective to see people interested in these topics and wanting to talk about these topics and wanting to learn more and begin their own research within these topics and not even having the baseline to even start anything essentially.
Yeah, I definitely share a lot of those same frustrations. Yeah, because we have talked about this before, and I joke that like my mom is not going to go on a medium like Google Scholar or ResearchGate to look for information about, maybe a health condition that she's worried about. You go to Google or you go to other search engines or the news, and a lot of times, as we've seen, throughout recent things, that the news and media tend to distort a lot of what was originally real research that was, based on a lot of evidence and fact. So that is definitely a huge frustration, is how the general public is going to access research. And then the other thing for me, as I'm thinking about like a future career in research, is like, what frustrates me even in a department like we're in right now, where I, immediately thought there's so many progressive thinkers here and everybody is really, they've really got their mindset on the right goals. But even amongst people like that, I feel like not everybody knows who their research is for. Who is your research going to help? Who is your research going to benefit? And I feel like that's not a question that every researcher asks themselves. And I think it's a really important question to ask, because if you're, if you're researching about an invasive species in a forest in, the middle of Thailand, and you need to conduct research in the field there, are you going to talk to the community that actually lives there to figure out any of the other drivers and other actors and factors that are connected in that network that is probably existing, or that the problem itself is existing within? And a lot of the times the answer to that is no. Like, a lot of the times people don't consult with the community that these issues are directly affecting. They're just coming in and kind of placing themselves into the situation as academics and scholars, and trying to find their own solutions without thinking about who it's actually harming or benefiting. So that's definitely a big frustration for me, is academics and scholars and researchers, we're not in this bubble where we do research to benefit other academics and scholars. I mean, for me at least, it's a personal philosophy that your research or your work should be helping other people outside of academia, like, absolutely. So that's definitely one thing I would want to change.
That's perfect. Yeah, I loved all of your answers. So I'd like to encourage everybody who is participating in this to feel free to ask any questions if something piques your interest or you want to hear more about something, because I would most certainly rather answer your guys' questions than continue to talk about myself. So we do have one question, and that is, what other resources would you recommend, and I assume to the community, to access research? So Google Scholar was mentioned and LearnGala. So are there any other resources that you would recommend to have easier access to this type of quality information? I'm not entirely sure myself, so I usually end up using either Google Scholar or to find something quickly, I suppose. But I guess it's almost a little bit of academic fluency, maybe, that even looking through Google, that you could find links. But I think maybe looking up specific journals, maybe, if you know kind of the realm of your topic. I can't remember the specific one right now. I apologize. I believe it starts with an E. But there are several journals that have like PDF versions of all of the research that is available, and it is free, which is big for me because I don't want to pay for a journal when I'm looking for sources for my project, because they can get quite expensive. So I think that the biggest one would be looking at places like Google Scholar, because they usually compile, I guess, usually open access, but more academic information. But I don't know if our graduate students have more experience in searching for information online.
I can jump in real quick. So just going with the same thread in Google Scholar, one of the things that was super helpful for me, actually in undergrad too, was you can, I'm sure you've seen, like, if you've used Google Scholar before, there's like that year filter that you can add, so you can look at more recent articles or older articles. But then if you keep going down, I believe there should be a checkbox where you can look for open access articles, so that you can filter your results to only show articles or journal papers that should be open access. It's not always true. Sometimes I'll click a link and it actually won't be open access, but that has definitely helped. And there's one more thing that I was gonna say. No, it's gone. But yeah, that would be one of the main things that I would suggest. Oh, and then like Dolores was mentioning earlier, that Gala platform is super helpful because you know, a lot of the posts on there are by professors within our department and outside of our department who are conducting, you know, real research with students and with their graduate and PhD students. So it's a lot of really awesome information on there as well.
Perfect. I guess I'm gonna unless somebody has something, you know, that they're really itching to say, I think I'm gonna transition into the third section. So this one, I would love to see if any of our community members in this in this discussion here might want to write something in the chat, because this is something that I would like to take away for myself, and that is that. So we've discussed the gaps that we see in our own departments, and how we think we can interface via community service with the community as academics. And so I kind of wanted to ask the panelists, in your career and throughout your career, how would you like to improve or close, fill these gaps that you've noticed in these in your own department, your institution, your level of education, and how that can can kind of strengthen the ties between the community. And for any of the other attendees in this conference, I would very curious to know if you have any ideas as to like what you would like to see from academia. So if you're a community member and you're looking at academia, you know, are you wanting us to like get off our high horse or something? And like, what are you looking to see from academia that we could better strengthen the relationship between academia and the community? Because I think that's really important. All right, so I'll start. I think that developing new methods for labs is something that I would be really concerned with. I would like to pursue becoming a professor, and I think that developing a new way of looking at labs and looking at how the university can look at kind of trying to partner with the community. I loved what we were able to do with the Urban Garden, Cadillac Urban Garden in Detroit with Dolores, because that was an opportunity to directly apply the research that we did to the community. And as an academic, it was a great feeling to be able to have that immediate interface with the community and have that immediate result of coming up with a conclusion on the research that we did, and then immediately being able to turn it over to the community and say, you know, here's what we feel comfortable recommending, and here's what we found, and being able to let them use this information very quickly and directly, I felt was really important. And I would like to try and develop I think lectures and labs can do that, but being able to develop a class setting that encourages that type of community partnership with the university or any level of academia, I think is something that I would like to try and tackle throughout my career.
With my gap, I feel like I could improve it by allowing more, like in the future, helping more students get the experience to research. And I could do that with like my school, because my school, they partner with a lot of partners that like jobs that they can get to like, you know, have a workplace experience. So I feel like once I'm older and like I like become like hopefully a biosystems engineer, like I could partner again with this school so I can like, you know, interact with students and give them the experiences they can have to get like more involved in research for the future to practice.
I can go ahead. So I just like, I couldn't help but think a professor of mine in our class the other day, he said, I need you all to realize that your minds and this way of thinking where we critique mainstream science and what's become like the norms in our field, and this is like within ecology and environmental science, that way of thinking is not the majority, it's actually the minority. And you know, they always say that like ignorance is bliss, and like ignoring the things that make you uncomfortable is so much easier than delving into what's uncomfortable and makes you feel almost like shameful at first because of you know, you think about the negative things that have become normalized that you might have been perpetuating in the past. But like that point of realization is super important, and I think especially in science, it hasn't happened a lot yet for a lot of people and a lot of researchers out there. So at least for me, that would be a main, I guess, goal throughout my future research and throughout my career in research, is just to Sorry, my dog threw treats. Not happy right now. But yeah, for me, like throughout my research, I just really want to normalize the idea of critiquing what people think is normal in our field. The idea that, you know, community service is going to a soup kitchen, whereas scientific research is working in a lab or working in a field. I mean, that's just not true. I mean, it really goes together, and we're figuring out through the research that we've done in all of our own experiences, especially with Dr. Carmona, that community service and research really go together. And the outcome of that is, it can be just like so incredible. So that would be like the main thing I would want to implement throughout my career in research in the future.
Yeah, I guess I can touch a little bit on this too. I think for me, post grad school, I've lived in Detroit my whole life. I've grown up in Southwest Detroit, and I want to work in Southwest Detroit. This is my community, and I went to school to serve my community essentially. And the best way I thought I could serve my community was through environmental science. But I think that when I graduate, I definitely want to work as a community planner, where I'm able to integrate my interdisciplinary skills of environmental science, public health, and planning into one, and work with community on various projects that they identify. I think it's really important to remember that you are working for with the community as opposed to for the community. And I think that's a really big I guess difference that people oftentimes forget. You need to work with residents, with community, because they are the experts. They're the individuals that know what's going on. They know the problems. They know the potential solutions. They just need the tools and assets to be able to do it. Community knows so much, and they're so knowledgeable. And I think it's really unfortunate that a lot of times researchers, academia, whoever it may be, comes into communities, takes the valuable assets that they think that community has, and then leaves. And I don't think that's appropriate, and I think that needs to end and stop right away. So for me, I feel that coming back and working in my community again with them as opposed to for them is the biggest difference that I can make in implementing a global green space, and which in turn will hopefully reduce the public health issues that we have, and especially the chronic diseases that we have within the neighborhood. So that's what I kind of, I guess, think is just definitely working with them to support them in their goals and initiatives.
Yeah, so my career path is probably going to be relatively similar to Caleb's. I'm also hoping to become a professor. And I mean, really the goal for me is to kind of incorporate all the things we've been talking about to make sure that we do have good community outreach, that, you know, we do provide back to the community. Like in physics, you know, I know at Eastern, the SBS tries to do, the Society of Physics Students tries to do outreach to local schools to teach them about physics and get them interested in science. That's one thing to do. And then another thing is the education, trying to educate people in a way that will develop critical thinking skills and also help them, you know, get interested in science and at least trusting it. And then, you know, in terms of more community service, even I remember in one of my classes, my physics teacher was talking about, okay, how is this real world applicable? We're learning about, you know, storing energy in electric fields. Well, people are looking at using, you know, capacitors, high energy capacitors to store electricity. Like, this is going to be the future. We're going to have to store energy made from solar panels and other green energy, right? This is how you can give it back to the community. This is how you can apply this. So it's a mixture of these things, you know, and just putting them together and trying to, you know, influence a student's understanding as to how they can give back to the society, give back to the community with their education.
I'm undecided in which area I want to study. I have like a couple of interests, but I'm not exactly sure what I want to pursue. So I do know that I want to continue working with the community and finding ways to help them, whether that is through research or science or some other way, whatever I end up studying in the future. But that is my answer for now, because I'm not sure, but I do know that I want to continue doing what I've been doing so far researching and finding ways to help the community through my research and making that research accessible to them.
Perfect. I think that was everybody. We had one comment from one of our attendees that said that academia should be looking to directly locating problems in the community and working with them and making lists. I think that's an amazing idea. I think that taking a class and looking at either an organization or a specific area of the community and looking at, what types of problems are they experiencing and how can academia contribute to these, where maybe it leads to research, to publication, but I think that the focus here would be, okay, how can we work directly with the community in a way that would provide them immediate answers and a possible solution that would be, I guess, more. I would emphasize the immediateness and the ease of access, because if you're working directly with academia, that's a great way to have, accessibility is not an issue anymore if you're working directly with the university and they're providing you with their results. So I think it's a great idea. We have 2 minutes left. So if anybody would like to, any of the attendees, if they would like to, shoot some questions to any of our panelists or to the panel as a whole, feel free to do so. I think we'll stick around for 2 more minutes, and then I think some of us have to go. But thank you so much for attending. So thank you for your time. It was fun.
And I want to thank all the panelists, and let's give them all a round of applause. Great job. We learned so much from all of you, and we got a lot of inspiration from you. And you are off the hook. We're going to have just a few minutes transition here. But as I share my screen that lets new people know that there's about to be another session starting in 3 minutes, I can add a little bit to a question you asked. Somebody asked, how do you get this information? And it's so frustrating, as was mentioned by Dolores and others. You have to publish in these, high-ranking journals, which are owned privately, and then they have the copyright. And then it may be hard for a student or a member of the public to get a hold of that. And you mentioned great ways to do it, searching it on Google. Maybe there's a PDF of it available. But I also just wanted to add, now, prior to COVID, you could go to the library. There are some libraries you can still go to, either if you're a student or if you're a community member, or you can go to your public library. And sometimes you can access full text articles if you are at the library that you can't get if you are at home. Even if you're still accessing it on the computer, the libraries can give you better access. And then there are digital archives like HathiTrust digital libraries. And sometimes you can find an article there. Now, I oftentimes get frustrated because you can go there and they say they have your article, but then they say, you can only search for a keyword. You can't see the whole article. And that can be disheartening. But every so often, it miraculously says, you have access. Maybe they say because of COVID-19, they're giving more access than usual to articles. So sometimes miraculously it works and you get the article that way. You can also go to worldcat.org. It shows, of course, that depends on if you already know, oh, this article in this journal is just what I need, but I can't pay for it. You can go to worldcat.org and find out which libraries have it. And either you can ask for it in interlibrary loan, even from the public library or for a university library. Or if you say, oh, my friend goes to that university and they have it. I do this all the time. I email my friends. I say, can you get me this article? Your library has it. Those are just a few ideas I have, but I do admit it is in general frustrating. But I just wanted to add that 2 cents.
Gail, may I add my 2 cents? This is
Yes. Yes, turn on your video too, and we can see
I'm
it.
on. I just want to thank all of you, students and researchers, scientists, because in my undergraduate life, a million years ago, I was, and I continue to be a biology major. But I've done a lot of work in the not-for-profit world, and I put that in the chat, but let me just add it briefly, a comment, which is a way to thank you. Because I think what my experience, and of course, experiences as great as they might be are limited. As the not-for-profit world, you look into an issue, whatever that might be, let's say homelessness, and then you try to respond to it in whatever ways you can. And then you look into the whole area of advocacy, which brings in predominantly the social sciences. But rarely do we look at science as another partner to resolve, to work with. I think this horrible time we're going through, very painful, etc., is exploding all of the systems. So my dream as an elder in this particular panel is to see that and hope that all the systems, education, health, research, social, et cetera, are going to have the opportunity to really find avenues to affirm each other, work together, and not have the dichotomy we've had for centuries between science and other disciplines. If I could go back to teach, I would love to have any one of you as a student, because I would learn so much from you. So thank you very much.
I second all that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us. You're welcome to remain to hear our last session, but you're also free to go. I know you're all busy students with a lot of things to do. So thank you so much. Caleb, you did a great job taking charge and vetting all these, asking all these questions, and all the participants. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your thoughts.